So there's a story moving through royal circles right now that is, frankly, a little bit stunning because it is not about Harry and it is not about Meghan. This time, the tension is allegedly coming from inside the house. Sources are claiming that William and Kate walked straight past Queen Camilla at a formal event and didn't curtsy, didn't bow, didn't do the one small gesture that royal protocol has demanded for generations. And according to insiders, King Charles is not just aware of it, he is furious. Stay with me. Welcome to the Royal Voice,
where the crown speaks.
So let us get into it. Here's what's being reported. According to British tabloid sources, at one of the family's recent formal engagements, William and Kate reportedly passed by Queen Camilla without performing the traditional curtsy and bow that royal protocol expects from junior members of the family toward a queen consort. It sounds small when you say it out loud, a missed curtsy, a skipped bow. But inside a family where every gesture, every camera angle, every inch of body language gets analyzed by royal watchers around the world, this is not small at all. This is a signal, and the people around the king reportedly read it exactly that way. Royal commentator Ian Pelham-Turner has been one of the loudest voices on this, and what he said is worth sitting with. He's described the current dynamic between Camilla, William, and Kate as noticeably lacking in warmth, and he's pointed directly to this moment, the walk past, the missing curtsy, as something many are interpreting as a public act of defiance. And here's the part that matters most. He says Charles will stand fully behind his wife, not stay neutral, not smooth it over quietly behind the scenes, fully behind her. Now, if you know anything about how this family actually operates, you know that is a big deal. Charles has spent years, over 2 decades really, trying to build public acceptance for Camilla. From the moment they married, this was always the quiet project running underneath everything else. Turn the other woman into the queen, and do it slowly enough that the public would come along for the ride. It worked. Camilla walked into that coronation as Queen Camilla, crown and all, with far less public resistance than almost anyone predicted a decade ago. So if William, the future king himself, is now allegedly signaling disrespect toward her in public, that's not just an awkward moment at a garden party. That's a direct challenge to something Charles has spent his entire second act as a public figure trying to protect. And that is exactly why, if these reports are accurate, Charles is said to be taking this so seriously. But here's where I want to slow down, because there is more going on underneath this story than one skipped curtsy. According to the same reporting, this tension isn't happening in isolation. It's allegedly tangled up with something else entirely. William's growing frustration over how far Charles has been willing to go to rebuild his relationship with Harry. Sources say the king has reportedly been working to make Harry and his family feel welcome during recent visits to the UK, smoothing the path for a possible reconciliation. And William, according to these same insiders, is not thrilled about it. Not thrilled that nobody fully prepared him for how far his father was willing to bend. Not thrilled that the son who stayed, who showed up, who has spent years quietly carrying the institution forward, is watching the door get held open for the son who walked away. So when you put those two threads together, a king reportedly softening toward Harry and an heir reportedly cooling toward Camilla, you start to see a family under a very specific kind of pressure. Not scandal, not collapse, pressure. The kind that builds slowly in body language and seating charts and who curtsies to whom, long before it ever shows up in a headline. Let's subscribe real quick if you're new here, because this family drama is not slowing down anytime soon. There is a lot more coming, and you'll want to be here for it. Now let's talk about why a curtsy actually matters, because I think a lot of people watching this story assume it's just an old-fashioned formality nobody really cares about anymore. It isn't. Royal protocol around bowing and curtsying is one of the oldest, most rigid systems of visible hierarchy left in public life. Kate, as Princess of Wales, is required by tradition to curtsy to Camilla as queen, even though Kate will one day outrank her as queen consort herself. William, as heir to the throne, bows to his father the king, but the expectation toward Camilla, as the king's wife and queen, has traditionally still applied. These gestures aren't about personal feelings. They are the physical, visible language the monarchy uses to tell the public silently exactly who stands where. Skip the gesture, and you are not skipping etiquette. You are, whether you mean to or not, saying something out loud without saying a single word. That's what makes this story land so differently than a typical royal rift rumor. This isn't Harry giving an interview. This isn't a tell-all book with a chapter titled After a Bruise. This is, allegedly, William and Kate simply choosing, in a room full of people who all know exactly what that walk past means, not to perform the one gesture tradition has always demanded of them. If it happened the way it's being described, it wasn't loud, it wasn't a scene. It was quiet, controlled, and precisely the kind of move that leaves everyone in the room asking each other afterward whether they saw what they think they saw. And that quietness is very on brand for William, if we're honest. This is not a man who explodes in public. He does not give the tell-all interview. He does not sit down with a journalist and air a grievance. If William is unhappy, and by every account coming out right now, he reportedly is, the way it surfaces is exactly like this. A missed gesture, a cooler distance, something small enough to deny but visible enough that everyone in that room clocked it anyway. And it's worth remembering, this would not be the first time a missing curtsy has become a genuine royal incident. When Camilla first became Duchess of Cornwall, there were years of scrutiny over exactly how senior royals treated her in public, precisely because those small physical gestures were being used by everyone involved as a running scoreboard of how much acceptance she'd actually earned. Every stiff photograph, every slightly too brief hug, every skipped formality got picked apart by royal watchers looking for a signal. So if William and Kate really did walk past her without the expected gesture, they would know, better than almost anyone alive, exactly how that moment would be read. Nothing happens by accident in front of that many cameras and that many trained eyes. Which is exactly why, if this is true, it's being taken so seriously behind the scenes. Now, I do want to be careful here because Buckingham Palace has not confirmed any of this. Not the curtsy story, not the reported tension between Charles and William, none of it. This is coming from anonymous sources speaking to British tabloids, filtered through royal commentators giving their read on what it might mean. That doesn't mean it's untrue. Royal insiders have been right about plenty of things the palace never confirmed until much later, but it does mean we should hold this with the appropriate amount of caution. A missing curtsy at one event is not on its own proof of a family falling apart. Still, and here's why I think this story deserves more attention than a lot of the noise floating around right now. Even Pelham Turner, someone who trades in exactly this kind of royal gossip for a living, made a point of saying what actually should happen here. He said the royal family needs to be seen by the public as one united front, not a real-life soap opera playing out in public, not a Netflix-style drama with rival factions and shifting alliances, a unit. And the fact that a commentator whose entire job is covering royal drama is the one saying, please, for the sake of the institution, act like a unit, tells you something about how this is landing with people who watch this family closely. Because here's the thing about the monarchy that a lot of people forget. Its entire public value, the reason taxpayers fund it, the reason tourists fly in to watch the changing of the guard, the reason any of this still matters in 2026 is the image of continuity, unbroken lines, generations standing shoulder to shoulder. The second that image cracks, even slightly, even over something as small as a missing curtsy, it chips away at the exact thing the institution is selling to the public in the first place. So think about where Charles actually sits in all of this. He is trying to hold two things together at once that are right now allegedly pulling in opposite directions. On one side, he's trying to protect his wife, a woman he waited decades to be able to stand beside publicly, whose acceptance he spent his entire reputation rebuilding. On the other side, he's trying to keep his heir, his future king, from feeling sidelined or disrespected in his own father's court. And apparently, right now, William feels like doing right by Camilla and doing right by Harry are somehow coming at his expense. That's not a scandal. That's a king trying to run a family the size of an institution where every relationship touches every other relationship, and there is no version of any decision that doesn't ripple outward and land on somebody else's feelings. And I think it's worth sitting with what this actually says about William too, not as a villain in this story, but as a man who is going to inherit all of it. He is watching his father spend political capital on two fronts at once, rebuilding bridges with a brother who very publicly burned them, and cementing the legitimacy of a stepmother William grew up watching complicate his own mother's final years. Nobody is asking William how he feels about either of those projects. He is simply expected to smile for the cameras and fall in line, the same way he always has. If there is truth to any of this, a missed curtsy might be less about disrespecting Camilla specifically, and more about the one narrow, quiet way William has ever let his frustration show, through absence, not through words. I'll say this though, if the reporting holds up, and if Charles really is choosing to stand fully behind Camilla here, that tells you something important about where his priorities sit at this stage of his reign. He has spent his whole life waiting to make her queen. He is not going to let a missed curtsy, allegedly from his own son and daughter-in-law, undo 2 decades of work without saying something about it. Quietly, most likely. Not in a statement, not in an interview, but in exactly the kind of private conversation this family has always specialized in, the ones nobody records, the ones that only surface months later as a source close to the family telling a tabloid what was really said. So where does this actually leave us? Right now, no palace confirmation, no named sources, no public statement from William, Kate, or Camilla addressing any of it directly. What we have is a claim from insiders filtered through a commentator about one moment at one event that may or may not have meant exactly what people are reading into it. But the fact that it's spreading this fast and the fact that it's landing on top of an already tense backdrop of Charles reportedly working to bring Harry back into the fold tells you this family is sitting on more pressure right now than the smiling Christmas card photos would ever let on. Watch what happens at the next big formal event. Watch the body language. Watch who stands next to who curtsies, who doesn't, and how close William and Camilla actually stand for the cameras. In this family, that's where the real story always gets told, not in a statement, but in the 2 seconds nobody thought the cameras caught. Because in the end, a crown doesn't just sit on one head, it sits on how everyone around that head chooses to act toward each other when they think no one important is watching. And right now, according to the people who claim to be watching closely, not everyone in that family is choosing the same way. I'll see you behind those palace walls.